Many people follow a bit cynical approach to influencer marketing. For us, they're not influencers, they are our community. So to me, it's no different than talking to our community. It's from there, let's take Milk as an example, and that's where we derive inspiration. That's where we derive input. That's where we derive where we come from. That's the community we serve. So if you start with a premise of, I have a brand and products that exist to serve a community, whether it's our consumers on Milk or whether it's dermatologists for Obagi, then it becomes a very natural way of engaging with them and investing with them and getting better and better and better at serving that community and engaging with them.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Conor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earned. Today I've got Michel, the founder and CEO of Waldencast on the show. Welcome to the show, Michel.
Hey, thanks, Conor. Great to be here.
And it feels like this has been a long time coming. We've been meeting for very long. And I remember meeting with you and the team, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's fun to have it come full circle.
Indeed. I think the first time we met is when I was back at L'Oreal. And that was one of the very first times we met. So that's been 6-7 years. It was really at the beginning. Yeah. And the beginning of your journey and about my end of the journey at L'Oreal and beginning my new entrepreneurial journey. But it's been a while.
Let's talk about that journey. I think that you've done something that very few people get to do, right? Which is, you went out, raised money, started, this business, Waldencast, by bringing in Milk, bringing in Obagi, other brands. Tell the audience what that process was like. And also, I think for you, you had a very successful career prior to that, rising up the chain at Procter Gamble for 14 years and then L'Oreal for another 7 to 8 years. And what made you decide to be like, you know what, I've got this comfy job. I'm going to go have my butt kicked for the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's been kicked butt indeed. No, listen, Conor, it's decisions like that come never for one reason. Many is for multiple reasons. I think at the more fundamental level is I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always been part of my DNA. I think the fact that I'm an immigrant to the US also speaks to that. I'm Peruvian, came with that, came when I was 23 years old to go to business school. Is this desire to do something a little bit different? I always thought that entrepreneurship and business was, especially as a young man, I was quite idealistic, and I thought that entrepreneurship and business were one of the best ways to improve society and improve the world. But then I came to business school, I had a mortgage, kids, and so on and so forth, all the usual great things of life. After business school, I started working at P&G. I loved it. It was an incredible career there. Some of my great best friends are all ex-P&G people, one of the best training schools, at least at the time in marketing, and then moved to L'Oreal, where I absolutely fell in love with L'Oreal as a company and L'Oreal's and the beauty business. But it came a point in life where kind of that desire to be an entrepreneur was still there. I had worked for 25 years, and I felt that I was young enough to still have the energy to do it. I think old enough to know more or less what I'm doing, not everything, but more or less what I'm doing. And it was the time, it was the moment, a lot of aligning circumstances. There was, of course, I had been maturing the idea of Waldencast for some years prior to leaving L'Oreal, seeing the business dynamics, the industry changing, how there was a business opportunity, but also combined with his personal desire to create something from scratch and building into something that has not just personal meaning, but also contribute in some small way to this industry that I love. And when I mean contribute in small ways, not just by creating great brands and supporting great entrepreneurs, but also by making the beauty industry three things that are important to me and to Incepti, my co-founder. More inclusive in the way brands portray consumers and people, more sustainable, and more transparent. And also three values that were important for us to the beginning. And there's nothing in business like creating, and you know this very well, the sacrifices and the difficulties that come with creating a company, but there is nothing in its thrill, in its excitement, doing something that has that meaning and that is important to you and hopefully is important to others.
Well, it becomes a part of your identity, right? Which is, I think, something that's just very different than working for another company, right? And I'm curious for you, is this something, because I think when I think about kind of Procter & Gamble and L'Oreal, I think about the staying power of a company that's been around for 100 years or whatever the timeline is that these companies have been around. Is this kind of a life project for you, or is this something that you,
for sure,
want to hand off? It is, yeah?
No, for sure. I mean, I never had a desire to go build something quick, sell it to somebody else, and then, drink margaritas at the beach. This is a life project.
Yeah.
This is something that is very personal and a life project. And I hope that not just Waldencast, but also the brands we build are here for the next 100 years. And the way we think about things, and sometimes where we're deep in problems, and sometimes we have deep problems, that's what maintains the true north, which is creating an amazing company that will be here 100 years from now is hard and is difficult, but we maintain a long-term view of how we're going to do about things. It changes your perspective and it focuses you much more into long-term value creation, which you hope that will accumulate exponentially over time by doing what you do. So it changes your perspective. For us, we're very much in this to be and to build over time one of the great beauty and wellness companies in the world, one of the great beauty and wellness companies in history. But it, of course, sounds silly when we're so small. Sounds silly when we're just at the beginning, when we have great highlights and difficult lowlights when you're just at the beginning. But that's the dream, that's the ambition, and one that we think is worth doing, is worth pursuing, and worth the sacrifices and worth the difficulties.
Yeah, what's interesting as well, just going back to thinking about Procter & Gamble and L'Oreal, is I feel like they both reputationally are seen as kind of finishing schools, right? Like Procter & Gamble, I mean, particularly kind of, I would say, 15, 20 years ago, it was like, that's where you go to learn how to do marketing, right? And L'Oreal has become like, okay, well, that's where you learn how to be a beauty executive. And then they get, you get pulled out or poached from there to go to other companies. And so I'm curious how you think about building kind of a culture similar to those companies where it becomes such a desirable place to work, right? Where people are like, I have to work there because, it will have X impact on my career, or I'll get to work with colleagues of, this caliber. How do you think about building that culture?
Culture is something we reflect a lot on. And I believe, people say it, I've invented this, but culture is probably the most undervalued strategic lever. And we think about it a lot. The first thing I ever wrote about Waldencast, and actually that's where the name was invented, was on a flight between LA and New York. And it was a simple one page. And it was all about culture. It was just about culture. It's about our values, the impact, what we're trying to do, and what we're trying to build. One of the things that are distinct about Procter & Gamble and L'Oreal is that they have very distinct cultures, very different from each other, but very distinct. And I think that is a very important part of their success. Now, Waldencast is neither L'Oreal nor P&G, is we are creating as we build our own culture. We try to codify those values to the best we can. And the very first time we were putting together the name, it was the name of the company was Waldencast. And I was walking in London and I saw a very British thing they do, which is they have the name of the company and what they do. John Smith Cobblers and Martin and Sons Butchers. And I said, great, I'm going to steal some of that. I'm going to say Waldencast, Dreamers and Makers. And that was the beginning of kind of what shaped a lot of the culture. Dreamers, because we have this ambition, these dreams, what we want to do, but Makers also because we want a culture of a company that has people with dirt in their fingernails and mud in their shoes, that we make things happen as we walk and that Makers culture. And then we try to codify those values of what we call our dreamer and maker values, is have a company of ambition with humility, of great ambition, but the humility to understand that we don't know everything, that we want to be better every day. A company of people that have grit, but also kindness. And we had a bit, we had to change it when we became a public company. But one of our recruiting criteria was no a-holes, and that was part of what we tried to build. So we tried to codify the culture. I gotta be honest, we're just at the beginning, and I think something that was particularly difficult to build, and is still in that process, is we started the company in April of 2019, March 2020, COVID, and the world went to managing by Hollywood squares, and that becomes very difficult to build a culture, very difficult to integrate and create those connections. Now we're outside of that. Now we're more in office, more presential, but nonetheless, it was a difficult thing to do when we were just at the beginning. So it's a journey. It's a journey.
Well, I think the reality is that the cultures that have been built there were built over multiple decades. They weren't built over, multiple quarters.
Exactly.
And so again, the question is, how do you build that over time? And again, we're in, 13, 14 years into this, and, still feel like we're building that, right? And so...
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of what helps us shape things is, we're quite deliberate, is who do you recruit? Because part of what we want is, when we recruit someone, is for Waldencast to become their company, for our dream to become their dream, and help us shape that culture. So especially on senior managers, it's very important to be very thoughtful on that hiring, because they will be instrumental in building that culture with you, with us.
Yeah. What made you decide that, obviously the two big pieces are Obagi and Milk. What made you decide that those were the first right two pieces?
Yeah, it's probably one of the two best decisions I've taken in my life, both Milk and Obagi, despite we had some difficulties that are part of the birthing difficulties, particularly in Obagi. It was quite simple. We were trying to build the basis of a future public company that had two complementary brands that were very different from each other in terms of its consumers, its businesses, its business fluctuations. And the beauty business very well. Sometimes skin is up, makeup is down. So have that complementarity of business. But they have brands that had that is something special in what we thought, or what we think, are the most attractive parts of beauty. So just take Obagi as an example. Skincare is a big, massive category. Premium skincare growing faster than the average. And within premium skincare, kind of physician medical skincare growing the fastest. And they happen to be also with the most attractive structural economics. So within that business, Obagi existed for 35 years. In my point of view, and of many others, is a crown jewel in terms of equity on that business. It's an incredible reputation among physicians. It's still number one among the most, 2/3 of the most prescribed reasons why people go to a dermatologist or esthetician. So it's an incredible brand that had all the potential to grow into something much bigger. And in the case of Milk, very similar. Within makeup, kind of masstige, clean makeup, with that brand proposition that speaks to that audience, this Gen Z audience and its values, and a brand that, in my opinion, best represents the value of that generation. Was key. It's a brand it's a very special brand, has this very special thing about it. It's a real brand, not a collection of products masquerading as a brand, or performance marketing engine masquerading as a brand. It's a real brand with consumers with real passion and affinity for it. So when you start with those two pillars, you can start building around them. And of course, there were the quote unquote boring stuff of cash flow generation and how you can build can you impact gross margin and all of those things that are where I spent most of my time on a day-to-day basis. But fundamentally, those were the reasons. These are incredible pillars. In my view, of course, I'm biased. They're among the best, if not the best, brands in the best categories. So that was the reason.
It seems like it was two great choices. And I think particularly now, both brands seem to be really kind of cranking, right? Based on kind of the last couple of quarters, which has got to be exciting to kind of have those in rhythm and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it is thrilling. I think at the end of the day, again, we have a kind of long-term mindset, so we don't get too fussed about quarter to quarter. But of course, quarters matter because it's a bit of kind of time periods in a football game or something like that to see how you're doing. But what is most exciting beyond kind of the financial results is when I look at the fundamental metrics of this business, and whether it's the engagement with the community, our EMV, which is, as you know that with me, as somebody that I believe strongly in EMV as a great predictor of future growth of a brand, one of the best predictors of future growth of a brand, whether it is the reviews on our products, whether it's the feedback from retailers, from our community. I mean, the metrics on both businesses are off the charts. So yes, we're growing, but we're just at the beginning. I mean, our aim is ambition with humility. Part of the ambition is we want Milk to be the number one beauty brand of the new generation. We want Obagi to be the number one physician brand in the world. It may take us a few years, it may take us a few decades, but that's what we're aiming for. And these both brands have the bones to be able to do that. I don't think there's many brands. There's many great brands in the beauty in particular. They're amazing brands in beauty. But I think these brands have this little something special that if we do it right and we execute well, we'll get there.
Yeah, there's something very tangible, or I say it's like intangible but tangible. It's like a feeling. You're like, yep, This is both from a momentum perspective and from, like you said, a fundamentals perspective. It's like, okay, we got something going. We've got great products. That's working. We're building a real brand or brands that people are attracted to that are ultimately resulting in very tightly knit communities around those brands, right? And so that's really fun to hear. And just because this is the business I'm in, you talked about EMV, both the brands are on fire there, right? They're both growing over 100% year over year. It seems like that's been a very intentional investment over the last couple of years in particular, maybe a little bit before that. What made you decide to lean in there so heavily? And then what have you seen in terms of some of the impacts to the business overall, working with all these influencers and investing in social media?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a very natural choice. And many people follow a bit cynical approach to influencer marketing. For us, they're not influencers, they're our community. So to me, it's no different than talking to our community. It's from there, let's take Milk as an example, and that's where we derive inspiration. That's where we derive input. That's where we derive where we come from. That's the community we serve. So if you start with a premise of, I have a brand and products that exist to serve a community, whether it's our consumers on Milk or whether it's dermatologists for Obagi, then it becomes a very natural way of engaging with them and investing with them and getting better and better and better at serving that community and engaging with them. So it's not, here's a media channel that, we could do print, we could do this, or we could do influence. It's just it's a choice in the marketing budget. Frankly, the way it used to be for myself in the past in other places, it was just a marketing choice, how much you allocate to print. For here, it's a very important core part of what we do. We exist to serve that community. And as a consequence, engaging with them matters a lot. And then obviously, Milk was born like that, but existed like that. It was, we focused and amplified it. In the case of Obagi, it was very much like that, but perhaps not in the digital world. So now what we're doing is translating that, focusing the community into the digital world, to have more consumers and more of our practitioners interact with us as a brand, and then hopefully serve more people and transform the skin of more people thanks to getting them great products like Obagi.
Yeah, it's been really cool to watch, because I remember my first introduction to Obagi was like my mom, 7, 8 years ago. I was like, I found this great brand, and she was talking about it. I'm like, oh, cool, Mom, And then I honestly don't know that I hadn't thought about it a ton, just because, again, they weren't like a digital first brand, so they weren't hitting our radar quite as much until you guys got involved with them. And then it's like, oh. And so it's got to be interesting to take this brand that obviously has a very rich heritage, but not in the kind of social networks and channels like Milk had, and then to bring it to that group and have them embrace it as well and be like, oh, wow, this is a great product. This is a great brand. That's got to be fun to see.
Yes, and that is what is fueling our business and our results. Most people historically, perhaps like your mom, discovered Obagi when they visited a dermatologist. So there's a lot of people that work in the beauty industry that had even never heard about Obagi. It was a bit of a cult brand that if you didn't go to a dermatologist or if they just didn't discover it, all we're doing is we are engaging with people, not just in the office, but also it's an and, not an or, and outside of the office to say, there's this great brand that has transformative skin solutions that you should, discuss with your dermatologist. And people respond to that. And it's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. So one of the other things you've dealt with that I haven't personally dealt with, and most other people haven't dealt with, is the kind of day-to-day wins of being a public company CEO and managing investor sentiment, managing your own internal teams. Like they're watching the stock price go up and down and thinking about, how that impacts their lives. What have been your learnings now that you're a few years into this of being a public company CEO? What are the things that you've like, oh, this was harder than I expected, or maybe easier than I expected?
Yeah, it's been a huge learning. I obviously was part of public companies, but I was not the CEO of public companies. I was behind the scenes, if you want, in many of the public companies. It is a journey, I would say, of highs and lows. Generally speaking, what I try to do is maintain, again, one more time, a view on the future and the long term and the intrinsic value of the company. And we focus on, are we building real economic value, sales, profitability, and building great brands? And that's where we focus. And try to ignore, even though it's not easy, try to ignore the kind of daily and weekly fluctuations of it. What I know is that what we have today is a company that is fundamentally, substantially more valuable than what we had at the beginning. The better brands, better metrics in a number of ways. And that you have to have the belief that over time, market fluctuations and market value will catch up with that. And the empirical evidence is that is true. But you have to deal with the short-term fluctuations and issues and overhangs and sellers and people like that. And certainly our own employees and because they are people, they have priorities that they have to look at the shares and look at the stock. And by the way, the CEO is people too. The CEO also looks at those things, and you look at it and you get sometimes frustrated about things, sometimes happy about things. But that's difficult. It's the only way to do it is if you're focusing long-term value creation. And the day we IPO the company, one investor that has been with us from day one had a phone call, and we just about to celebrate kind of the IPO. And he was on the phone. He was calling me from London. And he told me something that has stayed with me, over time in how we manage the company, which is, congratulations, now you're public, manage it like a private company. Because that's the best way to ensure long-term value creation. And that's what we try to do as much on a day-to-day basis. We don't worry too much about the quarters, how we're going to land exactly the quarter. Let's adjust and push and pull and try to land the quarter exactly. We try to stay as much focused on long-term value creation. Now, at the same time, of course, the quarters matter, and of course, the year matters. So we focus on how much we're going to do by quarter and so on and so forth. But we try to make decisions that are more long-term. For example, as you know, in beauty, marketing spending is quite a bit part of your P&L. You spend quite a bit on market. The easiest way to land your EBITDA on the quarter is just pull marketing back. Yeah, and you land it. Yeah. You land the EBITDA on that quarter. But you're hurting the brand long term. So we try to do, to the extent that we can, sometimes it's more difficult than others, is to stay the course. Stay the course as much as we can to deliver against the business. Don't know if it's a great answer because I'm still learning.
No, it is.
But that's what I try to do.
I love that perspective of managing it like a private company. And I think if you were to look at, obviously, I have a lot of exposure to the technology side of things. If you look at the technology companies that have had lasting, value, something Amazon's preached for a very long time, right? Like maintaining kind of long-term focus. And I remember one of the things that Bezos said, he's like, most people, forecast, okay, what's the value of this project over the next 3 years, right? Or 5 years, whatever it was. He's like, one of our strategic advantages is we take a 7 to 10 year time horizon on any investment that we make. And he's like, that puts us in a much better position than companies that are managing or forced to manage kind of more quarter to quarter or year to year. But it's hard to do in practice, especially in cases where, it's like in those cases, I don't know the exact stock structure, but it's like Zuckerberg can tell investors to screw off. He has, controlling share from a voting perspective. Doesn't matter. But yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I don't envy you. I don't want to be a public company CEO. It sounds hard.
Because it's fun parts, but it's hard. Yeah.
Well, let's do one kind of fun end of show question. So I remember getting advice from Christopher, who is I believe the president at Clarins. And he was saying whenever I travel, that I should put a layer of lotion across my entire body. And he had some very specific Clarins products that he recommended. And he said it will help you keep your dehydration down. You won't get as dehydrated because you lose water via your skin and et cetera. And we were talking before the show that you're on a plane every week, New York, London, New York, London. What are your travel tips? I'm a big traveler. How do we become better travelers like you?
Great. I have a routine that I've developed over the years.
Okay.
Some of it is sometimes a bit sad because sometimes as I roll I remember one night rolling into the JFK Delta Lounge, eating the Delta Lounge chicken with sparrows, and thinking this is great. It's comfort food. No, but there's probably just 2 or 3 things I do is I eat before the plane.
Okay.
At night, because normally I take the night flight, I take the red eye, eat before the plane, try to sleep as soon as I get on the plane. And on that note, I don't do the full body, but I do Obagi Hydrate Lux on my face, which is a very hydrating, long-lasting, moisturizing. I mean, it's the best hydrating cream, period. So Obagi Hydrate Lux is amazing. So you put it on your face and that's probably the 3 things I do before traveling.
I like it. Yeah. You do something enough times, you find like a rhythm to it. I need to start doing the lotion thing. I'm literally getting on a flight to Italy in 3 hours. So I'll test it out and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yes.
I won't be able to get the Obagi in time.
We'll ship you some Obagi Hydrate Lux to Italy so you can wear it on the way back. So
there you go. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time. Congrats again on all your personal success and the success of Waldencast and the brands. Very inspiring, I think, for other people that are in these larger organizations to see somebody break out and be so entrepreneurial. So congrats again.
Thank you, Conor. Really appreciate it.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.